then developed. It was about all of those kind of things. Well, start arbs have been about for forever, Delta. They've been about forever because we had, if you remember back in the olden days, there used to be triangular arbitrage. And it did actually used to exist because you would be able to pick up a phone to Singapore, get a price for euro dollar. You'd pick up a phone to New York and you get a different price for euro dollar, and you could actually just do the trade straight off on a triangular arbitrage, or pick up the phone, get a euro dollar, pick up a phone, get a pound dollar, pick up a phone and get a euro pound from 3 different banks, and you could actually make a profit in between. Because there was nothing automated, there was nothing connected in that sense. There was no way that anybody else could know exactly what everybody else was offering at that exact point. So that's been around for forever. The only thing that's been new in the world of trading was the arrival of algorithms that started to do all of this about 20 years ago. What we've tried to do in this classroom is we've tried to bring you the stuff that actually is institutional, the stuff that is actually used in the world of institutional trading, not stuff that we've invented. I've said this many times, we've not invented anything new. We've brought ways that institutions have used for a long time to the desks that retail traders have never seen before, potentially. But order flow has been around forever. All the ideas, all the setups, all the structures, they were way back in the 20s, they were in the 30s, they were in the 1950s, they were in the 70s, they were in the 80s. Charlie talks about the transition trade, the candle reversal trade. It's not Charlie's trade. It was done well before Charlie ever got his hands on it. He just learned what everybody else had known, or everybody else had learned, or all the good traders had learned about seeing the concept of absorption. And it's just about presenting it in such a way that's important, isn't it? It's about presenting it in a way that's important, that you guys can ultimately understand or read. And, the idea of gamma's a buzzword, as if it's just been invented. But gamma came out when the Greeks came out, when they started to work out what the Greeks on an option price was. That wasn't in the last 5 years, was it? I mean, that was a long time ago as well. So gamma came out when the Greeks came out. So the concept of gex came out when the Greeks came out. So these are all things, and I'm not talking about the Greeks in ancient Greece. I'm talking about obviously the option Greeks, but because the Greeks have been around for a while. So I mean, things like dealers' levels. This isn't new. It's not news. It's basically the big confluent strike prices. And when you look at the biggest confluent strike prices, look at what's happened today since we gave out the dealers' keys. There's the biggest dealer key was this one. Look at what's happened at this one here, guys. Selling, where did the buy come from? The dealer's key with the 2 lines. Where did the selling come from? The dealer's key with the 4 lines. And then when the breakout, the fastest candle took place where? When we broke the dealer's key with the 2 lines. Where did it go to? The next dealer's key with 2 lines. Where did it go back to? The dealer's key with 2 lines. Where did the fast money break come from when we broke the dealer's key with 2 lines? Where did it ultimately go? The dealer's key with 1 line at the very bottom edge on the very extreme price. So when you see the idea, you can see that this is real. This is something that really happens. It's not made up stuff. It's not somebody that's making levels up just for the sake of putting lines on like Fibonacci does. Fibonacci levels aren't real. They're not based on anything. They're based on counting rabbits. Come on, grips, guys. This is based on the reality of where dealers have positions, where the dealers are going to have to make big decisions. We've often said this over and over again. It's not a sell when we reach a dealer's key. It's not a buy when we reach a dealer's key. It's just a decision that's going to be made when we reach a dealer's key. And when we recognize that that's the most important part of the concept, that it's a decision that's going to be made, what we've got to then do is get into the charts, get into the tape, and try and figure out through other means, not this chart. This isn't going to tell us what the decision is going to be. The fast and slow might help us. It's pretty obvious that from the speed of the move to the downside here and the speed of the move back up here with the overlap, there's a very, very, very high probability this is going to be a sell, right? So probably the best trade on that entire chart is probably that one there. Number one, because we've already broken sell side structure here. Number two, the slow money move into the 1, 2, 3 grind there is pretty obvious, isn't it? So this chart can give us at least a lot of evidence based on price action that that's almost going to be 100% the best trade on the entire chart. And if this obviously grinds its way up to 405 or 450s, then of course we would start looking at these two price areas for a possible sell reversal. But remember, we're not trying to sell it here. We're not trying to sell it here. We're just recognizing that there will be a probable sell coming in. And what we've got to then do is get into the lower time frame charts, like a 1 minute delta chart or a footprint chart. And we've got to find the sell. We've now got to look at that and say, where is the sell coming in? What am I looking for? And you're obviously starting to hunt for that at 12 o'clock. You're starting to say to yourself, at 12, do I find any, for example, Voltics, if that's what you're using? Well, what happened up here? We see this massive bigger absorption of a price action, biggest absorption of these two buyers. So there's your absorption print. Now, obviously, on the absorption print, the price starts to sell off really nicely. And obviously, on the basis that we've now got a big absorption here, we've now then got a Voltic here. You say, right, if I can get a sell here, it's game over. We got a seller here, and it pushed. So we've now got a great sell level. So you mark the sell level. There's your next opportunity. There's a seller here. It pushed. So then you would mark that sell level there. We got a seller here. We got a seller here. You could have made decisions on each of those price points when you saw that coming in. And that's without footprint charts. That's without looking at the tape. That's without looking at any fancy other tools. It's just looking at Voltics, looking at what happens to the trade and then taking your shot. And you could have been involved in the entire ride south out of town here. And based on that entire ride south out of town, you've been able to find a cracking trade. Now, obviously, we've came into a dealer's key. The dealer's key on the S&P was 76.81, yeah? 76.81. What happened at 76.81 that we might have been interested in? So what happened on the S&P here at 76.81? There it is there. There's our dealer's key there, 76.81. So we're obviously interested in it. We want to try and figure this out. We've already seen a massive move. What happened? Did we get a slow grind into 76.81 compared to the fast move to the downside here? Yes, we did. If we were going to be buying it, would we need to buy it lower because of the delta? Yes, we would. Did you buy it lower? Yes, you did. There's the seller. So what could you have done with a high probability trade? You could just simply have waited for the seller, waited for this guy to go buy side. You might say, could I buy it there? Probably not. That's still very dangerous unless you like that type of trade. There's no reason why you can't take it, but we're trying to teach you guys to try and wait for a wee bit more. So what would be a wee bit more? Well, there was a sell candle here. So as soon as that sell candle failed to retest the lows, you should then assess, right, you know what, I'm in here. And you should have been paying about 84s for that position. 84s, 84.5, possibly as much as 84.75, maybe 85s. Because obviously you're going for this guy here as a first target at that stage. And it turns out that you did exactly that. You went 84 bid up to 94. You picked up another $500. 2 contracts, you did another $1,000. And then you get ready for the next opportunity, whether it's a buy or a sell. You say, well, I've got a bottom edge now in place. Now, if obviously you're trading from a market structural point of view, you haven't yet taken a buy trade, that's okay. Now you've got a good opportunity to start looking for your buy trade now, haven't you? Because this has widened the spread enough. And it's now building a hold above here that any buys could be pretty much anywhere in here. And we would actually start looking for them again. So a pull back into this on a half back, maybe here. You could start seeing a break below 90. Could be interesting. I might be interested in that. Let's see what happens. So when we get into making that decision, this is what we were talking about this morning, this idea that we then use whatever tools we've got access to, things like your order flow tools, your absorptions, your imbalances. And again, there's only so many things you can list off in terms of information you're going to get from a footprint chart. We'll do that in classroom this afternoon, so we make sure we're absolutely crystal clear that there are no new wrinkles in this. All there is a rehashing of all the information we've already got in a way that makes sense to you as a trader. And I actually had this conversation with Fabio a few days ago. Now he was talking. Obviously, we're talking about the various things that I'm working on that he was interested in, and the conversation went into things like deep charts. And I says the problem you're always going to get is the same problem as I have with a set of golf clubs. It doesn't matter how much I spend on a set of golf clubs. If I still don't know how to use them, the money I've spent on a set of golf clubs has been a waste, hasn't it? What's the difference between buying a £200 3-wood and a £1,000 3-wood? For me, zero difference. None at all. In a professional's hands, they'll say, well, I can hit the ball so much better with that £1,000 golf, that £1,000 3-wood than that £200 3-wood. The difference for them will be, potentially a few feet here, left or right, better distance, maybe a few yards better distance. But for me, it makes zero difference because I'm not a good golfer. So a good set of tools in a bad trader's hands is still going to be a pretty shit, right? And that's the problem. Everybody thinks that by buying new tools, they become better traders. They don't. Becoming a better trader enhances the tools that you're using. The tools don't enhance your ability to be a better trader. Trading is something that you learn through the grind of daily execution skills that the guys in this room are getting. The guys that have been in for a while really are starting to pick up on is it's their execution that makes the difference. It's their ability to run a market, run the risk book, and make profits from that risk. That's what makes the difference. And then the good tools start to make a difference in their hands, correct? Not the other way around. Not the other way around. And that's the problem that retail has, is that they give up on a tool as soon as it doesn't make them any money, when they don't realize it's not the tool that's not making them money. It's themselves using the tool that's not making them money. So I go out with that £1,000 golf, that £1,000 wood, and when I'm hitting a 200-yard shot, and I think I should easily hit 200 yards plus, and I hit it and it goes the same distance or a worse distance, and you go, that club's rubbish. That club's terrible, Sarah. I'm just going to bin it. It's not the club that's terrible. I never became a good golfer to make any value out of that club, did I? I just never became a good golfer. It's not the club that's bad. It's not going to make any difference in my hands. None at all. What's going to make a difference is getting better, and then the club will maybe make a difference.